Dearest Equator and delightful friends, a very good day to all of you. I am Shankri Venugopal with student ID number 860-830-235272001. And today for our subject, Personality ABPD 2103, we will be discussing further on the title, Personality and Gender Differences on a Global Perspective. Let's start by briefly defining personality and gender differences. Definition of personality aligns with psychological theory of individual difference, such as characteristics, pattern of thinking, feeling, and behaving. Gender differences pertain to the roles, behaviors, and expectations that society assigns to individuals based on their gender, which is a key focus in personality psychology. And understanding these from a global perspective is crucial. It helps us appreciate diversity and fosters better intercultural interactions. Now, let's look at the cultural context. Western cultures, particularly in areas, for today's example would be to United States and Canada, are characterized by individualism. Individualism emphasizes personal independence and self-reliance. In individualistic societies, people encouraged to pursue their own goals and achievement. In contrast, the Eastern culture, such for countries such as China, Japan, and Korea, they are known for their deep-rooted traditions, family ties, and community-oriented values. Now, all these characteristics significantly influence personality traits and gender roles within these societies. Eastern and Western cultures as a context provides a framework for examining cultural influences on personality, a common approach in cross-cultural psychology. The fundamental aspect of personality in culture, as we discussed earlier, Western aspect of personality, individualism. Individualism emphasizes personal independence and self-reliance. This cultural context promotes personal achievement, encouraging individuals to pursue their own goals, develop self-expression, and autonomy. In Western societies, individuals are encouraged to pursue their own goals, desires, often prioritizing personal success over collective well-being. This emphasis on individualism can be seen in various aspects of life, such as the education system, reward for personal achievement in the workplace, and celebration of individual contribution. Overall, individualism shapes how people in the Western cultures perceive themselves and interact with others. This fosters a sense of personal identity and freedom. The Eastern aspect of personality, collectivism. When we focus on the Eastern culture, one fundamental aspect of personality in Eastern culture, the collectivism emphasizes the need for goals of the group over individuals. In collectivist societies, people tend to prioritize family, community, and social harmony. This manifests in strong family bonds, respect for authority, and focus on group cohesion basically. These characteristics, individualism and collectivism, significantly influence personality traits and gender roles within these societies, as I will share with you later a graph that I found. Let's now do a comparative analysis based on collectivism and individualism. In collective cultures, individuals often derive their identity from their social connections and responsibilities. And in contrast, in individualistic cultures, identities is often based on personal achievement and autonomy. These fundamental differences shape behavior, social interactions, and even conflict resolutions strategies in profound ways. Now, these points illustrate the fundamental difference between individualistic and collectivistic cultures, highlighting how values and social norms shape behavior and attitudes in the Western and Eastern culture. Now, let's go into it. For example, for traits, self-identity, it is highly important and given a lot of priority in the Western collectivism, whereas it is given less importance in the Eastern collectivism, where group harmony is prioritized. For interpersonal relationships, in the Western collectivism, lower priority is given and there is less hierarchy, whereas in the Eastern individualism, high priority is given and there's a lot of respect for their elders. When we see achievement in the Western collectivism, personal achievement is the most important and valued, whereas in the Eastern individualism, collective goals are what is sought. For conflict resolution, this is with regards to communication, a direct approach is preferred in the Western collectivism, whereas in the Eastern individualism, an indirect approach is preferred. These cultural values influence how the big five traits are manifested and prioritized. Let's go into the five-factor model. Now, before we go into individually, in individual Western cultures, traits of openness and extroversion are often encouraged and reflecting a focus on personal exploration and assertiveness. Conversely, in the Eastern cultures, traits like agreeableness and conscientiousness are emphasized, prioritizing group harmony and duty. Let's look into the ocean model. O for openness, C for conscientiousness, E for extroversion, A for agreeableness, and N, neuroticism. All of these five factors, we all have a different variation of them. It doesn't mean having one is much more better than the other. All of us have these traits and all of us have a different degree of it. Let me give you an example. For example, openness, there are two extremes to it. If we are on the extreme end of the high openness, we have an almost magical thinking and an eccentric personality. Whereas if we are in the extreme lower scale of openness, we are extremely close-minded and inflexible. Another is, let's talk about neuroticism. Neuroticism, if we are on the higher scale, that means we have emotional instabilities and shamefulness, whereas on the lower spectrum, we have fearlessness and shamelessness. Now, these are not, the extreme ends are not necessarily good. So it is a variation of it that each and every one of us have. Now, as we can say, I came across this in our module, the gender difference in personality based on the five-factor model. And if we see this, the effect size of sex difference in personality, the five-factor model. Basically, if it is a positive, it means that the effect size, the men tend to score higher, and if it's a negative, the women tend to score higher. And these ocean traits have been broken down. For example, for extroversion, gregariousness, women score higher. For assertiveness, men tend to score higher. For activity, men tend to score higher. For trust, women tend to score higher. For tenderness, tender-mindedness, women tend to score higher. So there's a variation based on our genders. Generally, research indicates that minimal gender differences in openness, though some studies suggest that women may score slightly higher in certain facets of aesthetics and feelings. For conscientiousness, men and women tend to score similarly. However, women often score higher in specific aspects such as orderliness and self-discipline. For extroversion, men and women also show similar traits overall the scores. But men may score higher in assertiveness and excitement seeking, while women may score higher in sociability and warmth. In agreeableness, women typically score higher than men. And on agreeableness, especially in aspects of altruism, trust, and compliance. In neuroticism, women tend to score higher, indicating a higher tendency towards experiencing negative emotions such as anxiety, depression, and vulnerability. Now let's look further. Let's have a slightly better understanding of gender roles in Eastern and Western cultures as we spoke about it earlier. Gender roles in Eastern cultures have traditionally been quite distinct with clear expectations of men and women. Men are often seen as the primary breadwinners, while the women are typically expected to focus on family and household duties. However, modern shifts are challenging these traditional roles, with more women participating in the workforce and taking on leadership roles. In Western cultures, we have also experienced a shift in gender roles. Historically, men were seen as providers and women as caregivers. Today, there is a growing emphasis on gender equality with both men and women sharing responsibilities at home as well as the workplace. This shift, supported by cultural values of individualism and personal freedom. As we can see, the gender pay gap based on Forbes, we can see that South Korea and Japan stands with the highest gap in the pay between male and female, as opposed to the United States and Canada. This clearly can be uh, an impression of the collectiveness and the individuality that is expressed. In the Western societies, the women have fought for their rights and made sure that they are seen and they receive their fair share. Whereas in the Eastern societies, women are still conforming. So this is just an indication of where things stand. Now, let's talk about the comparative analysis of gender differences based on cultural context and personality. Now, comparing gender roles in Eastern and Western cultures, we see both similarities and differences. Both cultures are moving towards greater gender equality, though the pace and nature of these changes vary. In collectivist Eastern societies, changes often happen within the framework to preserve cultural and social harmony. While in the individualistic Western societies, changes are driven by personal rights and freedom. For a more nuanced understanding, Western cultures tend to promote individualism, potentially amplifying traits like assertiveness in men and emotional expressiveness in women. Eastern cultures, on the other hand, emphasize collectivism, potentially leading to higher conformity and traditional roles affecting personality expression. And now, let's move on to the next slide. To conclude, recognizing the impact of cultural context on personality and gender helps us build a more inclusive and respectful society. By appreciating these differences, we can foster better communication, cooperation between the communities in an increasingly globalized world. To summarize, we have explored the fundamental aspects of collectivism in the Eastern cultures and the individualism in the Western cultures, and the influence of personality and gender roles. Cultural contexts shape how personality traits are expressed and perceived, influencing gender roles, behaviors, and expectations. By recognizing these cultural nuances, we gain a deeper insight into the diversity and accurate understanding of personality across different societies. This awareness is essential in advancing research, fostering cross-cultural empathy, addressing global challenges related to gender and personality. Thank you so much for listening today.